What's up, sweet people? Hello, and welcome back to my channel, or if it happens to be your first time here, welcome especially. I'm Sally, and I'm so glad that you stopped by. Today, I am doing a bit of a pantry restock, but the catch is that it is all from scratch, and I have a copious amount of sourdough discard that I am trying to get rid of because I bought a new sourdough discard, and they gave me a ton of it, I bought a new sourdough starter, and they gave me a ton of it, and so I'm really just trying to use it up because I don't need all of it. So I started out making some sourdough discard granola. I got this idea from my friend Lexus. She did my nutritional therapy program with me, and I will link her account down below over on Instagram. But I got this idea from her, and then I just modified the recipe based on what I had. But I used a half cup of sourdough discard. I did a 1/4 cup of avocado oil, a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I did a generous pinch of salt and a generous sprinkle of cinnamon. So then I stirred this all up. It took a little while because the sourdough discard was so thick. I actually ended up adding a little bit of water to it as well, which you may have seen at the beginning, just to get it to a workable consistency. But I whisked this all up, and eventually you'll see me add in the oats. Like I said already, or actually I don't think I said already, I think I did about a cup of oats, but I'll put that all in the description box, exactly what I did, so you can consult it if you would like. And this was just a really handy way to use up the extra sourdough discard. My husband said it's his favorite granola that he's ever had. I personally thought it could be a little bit sweeter, but he liked it as it was, and you could always, add a little bit more like maple syrup or something to it if you put it on yogurt, or it just depends on how you use it. I guess it would be really nice if you did something like an acai bowl and you use this granola because it wouldn't be too sweet. It would just provide that nice crunch. Anyway, so once everything was thoroughly combined, I put it onto a baking sheet with just my Silpat on it, spread it out, smush it down as evenly as possible. And the sourdough discard was great in that it helped it clump together, whereas a lot of homemade granola kind of just stays in individual pieces. But I threw it into the oven at 350 for 15 minutes. I pulled it out, and then I broke it up using just a wooden spatula and turned it over, just stirred it pretty thoroughly, and I popped it back into the oven for another 15 minutes. Once it was done, I took some coconut shreds and I just added, I'd say, like 2 generous handfuls to it, along with some chopped pecans, just using what I had in the pantry. I think this would be delicious with dried cranberries or raisins, even dried cherries. Again, I just used what I had. So get creative with it, and I threw it into some glass storage containers and just popped it in my pantry. We enjoyed it thoroughly. So the next thing you're going to see me making in just a minute is using more of that sourdough discard. I wanted to make some waffles and keep them in the freezer so that I could just pull them out, throw them in the oven, or throw them in the toaster for really quick breakfast. So I modified a recipe from Little Spoon Farm here. I'm going to tell you what I did, and then I'm going to link her recipe in the description box. I'll write out mine as well, but I'll link her description because I don't imagine most of you have just 1,000 grams of sourdough discard laying around, and you probably want to follow her recipe. But I did 1,000 grams of sourdough discard. I did 240 grams of milk. That's about a cup. I did a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to turn it into like buttermilk. And then I did a half cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 8 tablespoons of melted butter, 4 eggs. I added 2 teaspoons of salt, which is about 10 grams. I think that weighing out your salt is probably the most accurate measure because finer salt's going to be denser, etc. And then just ended up mixing this all together. I'm sorry, I also added to it 2 tablespoons of baking powder. Did I say that? I may have. Again, it's in the description, but 2 tablespoons of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of baking soda. I mixed it all together. And as you can see here, it started to get really, really, really foamy, and my bowl was a little bit too small. So I ended up transferring it into my stand mixer and using that to thoroughly combine it. If you are doing the original recipe from Little Spoon Farm, don't add the baking powder and baking soda. Initially, I would recommend fermenting it in the fridge overnight and then adding that right before you're prepared to make your waffles. But I just greased my waffle iron with a little bit of avocado oil and spooned it in. You guys know how to make waffles, I'm assuming, so it's pretty straightforward, but ended up making a massive pile of them. We ate some for dinner that day and then threw the rest into the freezer. And like I said, just pulled them out topped them with like bananas and some honey and some cinnamon, and ate them with eggs for breakfast. And it was just a really easy thing to have on hand. Super duper tasty. I was very impressed actually with how they turned out just using the sourdough discard. So last thing I'm making is some homemade beef jerky. I love beef jerky, and it is such a great way to get some extra protein in. Great to have on hand for snacks. It's really expensive to buy at the store, but I was able to get a really good deal on some grass-fed, I think this was tri-tip. And the important thing for jerky is that you trim off as much of the fat as possible, because when it dehydrates, that fat can go rancid. We keep it in the fridge, and so it's not too big of a concern, but it turns out best, and it really does taste best if you trim off as much of the kind of external fat as possible. Then I cut it into really thin strips. At least I did my best. If you, or just depending on where you get your meat, your butcher might be able to do this for you. Eye of round is a really great cut to use for jerky. And oftentimes if you go to the butcher and it's like behind the counter and you ask them to cut it into strips for jerky, they will do that as long as they're not too busy. But just cut it into as thin of strips as possible. And then I'm making the marinade. I was going for teriyaki here, but I was trying to use up what I had. So again, I'm going to link a recipe that I know is really fantastic in the description box. This turned out pretty well, but it could have been better. So I did about a quarter cup of, you can use soy sauce, coconut aminos, or tamari, a few cloves of garlic, some minced ginger, and then I added 2 tablespoons roughly of brown sugar to this. I added a pinch of salt as well. You'll see that in a minute. And I added 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Mirin would really be ideal here as opposed to the apple cider vinegar. It didn't need the extra salt. We felt like this needed a little bit more sweet and a little bit less salty. But again, that's what I get for just trying to use up what I had in the pantry. It's still super tasty. So now I am just putting the beef pieces into a gallon bag. I try not to use a ton of plastic bags, but when it comes to marinating, I just find that it really is the easiest. So I toss those into my gallon bag. I pour my marinade on top, and you guys know the drill. You're just going to squish it around, make sure it thoroughly coats the beef. And then I think this is best if you marinate it for at least 24 hours. So I popped it into the fridge and just forgot about it. I think it ended up being like 2 days actually that I forgot about it, and it just has plenty of time to soak up all of the delicious marinade. Now I'm doing this in a dehydrator. You can absolutely use your oven. My parents were very, very generous to gift us a very nice dehydrator when we moved into our new home. And this was actually the first time making jerky in it, and it worked so nicely. But I put the little drip pan down in the bottom. This also made for super easy cleanup. It's the Kasori, I think is what you call it, dehydrator. And you can put the racks in the dishwasher. It's really easy to clean up, highly recommend. But I just spread the meat over the racks and tried to get it kind of as flat as possible so that it would have as much access to the air around it as it could, and put it into the dehydrator, close the door. I set it for 8 hours it was 165 degrees is what I ended up dehydrating it at. You can absolutely, again, use your oven, and there's plenty of information online about how to do that. But it dehydrated for 8 hours, probably could have gone a little bit less time, but I was worried because they were pretty thick pieces since I hand cut them. Turned out so well. That's it for today. Until next time. Bye.